Hi, I'm Tommy Thompson, and this is part 8 of my Pathfinding in Unity tutorials series. In part 7 of this series, I introduced you to the idea of navigation areas that you can use on a particular nav mesh surface and allow you to actually customize the costs that are attributed to particular areas. This means that you can then actually customize the areas of your navigation mesh such that some of them are more expensive than others, and that way it allows for the agent to prioritize an optimal path through the space. Now, one of the things that was happening there was every time I'm doing this, I'm actually building and baking my navigation mesh before I start running. However, what happens if in the event that I need to, as part of my game, maybe part of the world is changing, or I've got obstacles collapsing on certain things and what have you, I need to be able to rebake that navigation mesh at runtime. So I'm going to show you a really simple example based on the part 7 example where I'm going to actually make the game rebuild that navigation mesh for me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write the code for you during this just to give you an idea of how exactly to go about it. The first thing I want to do though is let's get rid of the navigation mesh. And if I quickly save that and run it, we're going to end up with a problem. In fact, I actually got a bug in my code, which it said here, if I go back and read it, set destination can only be called on an active agent that has been placed on a nav mesh. And you can see here that in start, I tried to call set destination, and I actually just said set destination in the nav mesh agent, and this is all from a very early tutorial in this series, and the problem is that all works fine provided there's actually a navigation mesh baked into the scene. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write a piece of code that is going to scoop up all the nav mesh surfaces that are currently in here. And in fact, all of these are actually nav mesh surfaces of some point or another. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to then generate the navigation mesh on the fly. Now, in order to actually do this, we need to download additional components that are not installed into Unity by default. One of the reasons for this is that we're now using the kind of relatively new and experimental high-level navigation mesh building components. And if you actually go into the Unity documentation, which I will show you right here, you can see here that at the time of this video, certainly, and I'm also running on Unity 2018.2, I believe, in this video, that some of the nav mesh building components we're wanting aren't actually yet part of the Unity editor installer when you actually download it off the store. Instead, we actually need to go to the GitHub and install them separately. So let's start by actually going to the repository for the nav mesh components page, and I'll make sure to actually put this into the description of the video when I'm done. And you can see here that there's a number of things that they've already provided, and it actually gives you a nice overview of some of the things that we're going to use. Specifically, we're actually going to use just nav mesh surface for this particular video, and I'll come back and actually look at things like nav mesh modifier and modifier volumes at a later point. So what I need to do is I'm actually just going to download this as a zip file. Just clone that repository. Now let's get back in and open it up. Alrighty, and here we go. We've actually got a bunch of stuff here. There's documentation, there's specific package manifest files and the like, and project settings if you want to create new projects, or actually you want to use the projects as part of this. I actually just want the nav mesh components piece here, which is really useful to me. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to copy and paste bits of this that I want into my project. So let's take nav mesh components. Actually, open up Unity again. Where are you? There we are. Drag nav mesh components into the project for me. And there we go, it successfully moved it into the particular project that I'm working on. That's great. And as you can see here, it's got some editor components, it's got scripts that we need, including nav mesh surface, which is going to come in really handy. Because what this is actually doing is it's enabling us to recognize a particular object in the scene as a nav mesh surface. And then what I'm going to do is once I've actually got all these recognized as nav mesh surfaces, I scoop them all up in my navigation mesh builder code, and I tell it to bake the navigation mesh for each of these surfaces. So let's quickly go in, and I'm actually going to add nav mesh surface to each of these. Now, as you can see, this looks remarkably similar to what we've expected before. Oh, right, so each of them, it dictates the agent type, whether or not there's any particular layers that it's using or it's not using. These are more interesting aspects about what the default area that we use for each of these pieces is, as well as the actual voxel and tile sizes we use in the navigation mesh. Kind of beyond the scope of this video, but there's actually a lot of customization we can do here, which is kind of cool. All right, so let's go in. And I'm actually going to create my new C# script. I'm just going to call it nav mesh baker. Super recognizable. Let's open up Visual Studio. With my nav mesh baker, what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a field of nav mesh surface. It's going to be an array of them. So I'm just going to call nav mesh surfaces. Come on. There we go. Get the using in there so the compiler error goes away. Great. And next up, what we're going to do, and this is all we need to do. It's actually really straightforward. And I'm going to write a for loop that iterates over that list of nav mesh surfaces. Straightforward. And say for each nav mesh surface, build nav mesh. And that's it. That's all I need to do. Compile that, make sure it's all tickety boo. Come on, you're really thinking about this, aren't you? Smashing. Go back to Unity. And then I'm just going to create an empty game object. Call it nav mesh builder, or baker even, because then I'm being consistent. And I'll just drag and drop that component on it. And then what I'll do is just lock that for a second, click on my nav mesh surfaces, drag them on. I could have been a little bit more intelligent about this. I could have went ahead and decided to run a piece of code that scoops up every game object with that component attached to it and add them all in programmatically. But I just wanted to quickly get it done for the purposes of this video. And then if we run it, look at that. And if I go into navigation, I can't because it's locked. You can see that it's actually built the region that we needed. Now, one thing I quickly want to fix, because I'm a little bit conscious of this, is if you go back into the code, you'll notice that I do this on the start method. At the same time, I'm also trying to set the destination on the NPC move behavior also during the start method. Now, there's one of two ways that we can actually go about resolving this. First of all, I could actually say, well, let's just do this on awake versus doing it on start. Which looks like it kind of solves some of our problems, or at least I think I'm more comfortable with it. Certainly, I think that's actually a little bit more appropriate, and I feel a little bit better about it. Alternatively, what I could do is if I go back into my code and make sure that that's set to start rather than awake, is if I can go into the script execution order settings under edit project settings script execution order. And then what I'm going to do is drag and drop the nav mesh baker in, and I'm going to put it above default time by -100 priority, which is a nice setting to use. And then that way I can ensure that the navigation mesh is always being built before it actually attempts to do the movement. And there we go. I feel a little bit better about that now. So this is just the start of actually using these automatic generation tools. I'll come back to this in a later example throughout this tutorial series. But for now, this just gives you an idea of if you really need to quickly scoop up all the available nav mesh areas that you want to have, and on the fly during the actual execution of your project, regenerate that nav mesh. This is how you can go about doing it. But again, I'm going to come back and go into this in a much richer detail later on. But as a kind of basics to get you started, this will help you out. This is part 8 of the Unity Pathfinding tutorial series here on Tableflip Games. Like and subscribe to the video. Come and support us on our Patreon. You can get these videos early, let you vote on new topics, and you can even get all the source material from these videos. Go on, you know you wanna. Do it.